There is a pattern most people notice, but almost nobody understands. A woman can feel deeply attracted to someone who is not always available, not fully predictable, and not easily influenced, while slowly losing attraction towards someone who gives constant reassurance, constant attention, and constant emotional certainty. On the surface, this feels confusing, because logic says attraction should grow where comfort exists. But psychology reveals something different. Attraction often grows where emotional certainty is incomplete. And this does not mean women want chaos. It does not mean they want emotional pain. What they respond to is something far more subtle: the presence of a person whose inner world cannot be fully controlled. Because control reduces mystery, and mystery activates emotional attention. The human brain is naturally drawn toward unresolved experiences. When something feels fully understood, the mind relaxes and moves on. But when something remains partially unknown, emotionally or psychologically, attention stays alive, and attraction lives inside sustained attention. This is why desire is rarely connected to possession. It is connected to emotional discovery. A woman does not consciously think, "I want someone I cannot control." Instead, her nervous system senses something deeper. This person exists independently of her approval. He does not shift identity to maintain attraction. He does not abandon his center to avoid discomfort. He remains emotionally present, yet internally autonomous. And that autonomy creates psychological tension. Not fear, not distance, but fascination. Because when someone cannot be emotionally predicted, the brain begins searching for meaning. And searching creates investment. To understand why desire increases when control decreases, we must first understand how the brain processes emotional security. Humans constantly try to reduce uncertainty. In relationships, this often appears as reassurance, wanting to know where we stand, how we are perceived, and whether connection is stable. But attraction operates differently from attachment. Attachment seeks safety. Desire seeks aliveness. And aliveness requires a small amount of emotional unpredictability. When a man becomes fully predictable too early, emotional stimulation decreases. Conversations become expected. Reactions become known. Emotional outcomes feel certain. The brain adapts quickly to certainty. And when adaptation happens, dopamine, the chemical responsible for anticipation, drops. This is why excessive availability unintentionally weakens attraction. Not because kindness is unattractive, but because emotional discovery stops. Now here is the deeper psychological layer. Women are biologically and psychologically attuned to emotional environments. Their attraction system continuously evaluates whether a person possesses internal strength, not physical strength, but psychological independence. If a man's emotional state depends heavily on her responses, she unconsciously senses influence. And influence reduces intrigue. Because when someone can be easily shaped emotionally, the interaction loses depth. But when a man maintains emotional autonomy, responding authentically rather than reactively, something changes. She cannot fully predict him, and unpredictability, when paired with emotional stability, becomes compelling. This is the key distinction. Chaos repels, Coldness disconnects, but grounded unpredictability attracts. It signals that the person has an inner life beyond the interaction, and humans are drawn toward depth they cannot fully map, because mapping ends curiosity, and curiosity is the beginning of desire. Attraction changes the moment emotional power shifts. Not power in the sense of dominance or control over another person, but power as self-possession. The female mind does not interpret power the way social media describes it. Loud confidence, aggression, or constant assertion rarely sustain attraction for long. What the subconscious actually reads as power is much quieter. A person who is emotionally influenced by reality, but not emotionally controlled by approval. And this distinction creates magnetism. Every interaction between two people contains an invisible negotiation, not spoken, not planned, but felt. Each nervous system unconsciously asks, who is emotionally centered here? The person who appears most internally stable becomes the psychological reference point of the interaction. And when a man becomes emotionally predictable in his need for validation, the balance shifts. His reactions begin depending on outcomes. Attention becomes investment heavy. Small changes in tone or response affect him visibly. At that moment, emotional gravity weakens, because attraction does not grow toward dependency. It grows toward stability. Emotional independence communicates something ancient to the human brain. This person belongs to himself first, and belonging to oneself signals resilience. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, attraction developed around perceived emotional capability, the ability to remain grounded in uncertain environments. Someone easily destabilized by emotional fluctuations signals fragility to the subconscious. But someone who remains calm without withdrawing communicates adaptability. And adaptability feels safe, yet exciting. This is why emotional independence often gets misunderstood as detachment. Detachment creates distance. Independence creates presence without pressure. A confident, emotionally independent man engages fully when he chooses to, but his emotional state does not collapse when interaction pauses. He enjoys connection, but does not cling to it. And paradoxically, this lack of clinging increases emotional attention from the other side. Because when emotional outcomes cannot be guaranteed, curiosity increases. The brain begins searching for patterns. Why is he calm? Why does he not react strongly? Why do I feel slightly pulled toward understanding him? These questions create cognitive engagement, and cognitive engagement slowly transforms into emotional investment. Now something subtle begins happening internally. Instead of him trying to gain her attention, her mind begins trying to understand him. An understanding effort creates attachment. People value what they invest mental energy into. This is one of the deepest psychological mechanisms behind attraction. When emotional independence exists, interaction feels voluntary rather than negotiated. She does not feel responsible for maintaining his emotional stability, and freedom allows attraction to expand naturally. Here lies the paradox most people miss. The less someone tries to control emotional outcomes, the more emotionally influential they become. Because influence comes from emotional steadiness, not pursuit. And when emotional steadiness combines with warmth, not coldness, desire begins forming quietly beneath awareness. Not dramatic, not explosive, but persistent. And persistence is what turns curiosity into longing. There is a psychological moment where attraction quietly crosses a line. It stops being simple interest and begins becoming emotional preoccupation. And this shift rarely happens because someone did more. It happens because something remains unfinished. The human brain is deeply sensitive to incomplete emotional patterns. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency of the mind to remember and return to experiences that feel unresolved. When something feels fully explained, emotionally predictable, or completely known, the brain closes the loop. But when a person remains partially unknown, emotionally present yet not fully transparent, the loop stays open. And open loops demand attention. This is where mystery begins influencing desire. Mystery is often misunderstood as hiding emotions or playing games. But real psychological mystery is not secrecy. It is depth that reveals itself slowly. A confident man does not overshare to secure connection. He allows understanding to unfold naturally over time. He answers honestly, but he does not rush emotional exposure to guarantee closeness. And this pacing creates anticipation, because anticipation activates imagination. A woman's attraction system is strongly tied to emotional imagination, the ability to mentally simulate future emotional experiences. When she cannot fully predict someone, her brain fills gaps with possibility. Possibility increases emotional engagement. She replays conversations. She notices small details. She wonders about meanings behind behavior. And importantly, this thinking often happens when he is not present. This is where desire strengthens. Attraction does not grow only during interaction. It grows in absence, inside imagination. Predictability removes imagination. Mystery feeds it. Now something deeper begins occurring neurologically. Dopamine rises not when reward is certain, but when reward is possible yet unclear. This is why uncertain outcomes feel emotionally stimulating. The brain remains alert, searching for signals. But this only works when uncertainty feels safe. If unpredictability feels unstable, anxiety replaces attraction. If unpredictability feels grounded, curiosity replaces certainty. Confidence provides the grounding that allows mystery to feel safe rather than threatening. This combination, emotional safety plus psychological unknown, becomes highly compelling, because she senses stability while still feeling discovery. And discovery is essential for desire. Desire is movement towards something not fully possessed. When someone becomes emotionally fully accessible too quickly, the discovery phase collapses. The mind stops exploring. But when emotional layers unfold gradually, attraction experiences renewal again and again. Each new insight feels earned. And earned emotional understanding creates deeper value. This explains why some people become more attractive over time rather than less. Their presence continues revealing depth, not because they manipulate perception, but because they are internally complex enough that understanding them takes time. Complexity invites curiosity. Curiosity sustains attention. Attention fuels desire. and desire sustained through curiosity becomes emotional attachment. At this stage, attraction stops being about appearance or behavior. It becomes about emotional experience. She feels something evolving, and evolution keeps the brain engaged. But the deepest transformation happens in the final layer, because the real reason women desire what they cannot fully control has less to do with mystery and more to do with identity. At the deepest psychological level, desire is not about another person at all. It is about what that person awakens inside us. And this is where the idea of control becomes misunderstood. When someone is fully controllable, emotionally predictable, constantly adapting, always seeking approval, the interaction becomes emotionally safe but psychologically flat. Nothing challenges perception. Nothing expands emotional experience. But when a person cannot be fully controlled, something different happens. They introduce uncertainty not through instability, but through self-definition. A man who is emotionally grounded does not abandon his identity to maintain attraction. He listens, adapts, connects, but he does not dissolve himself in the process. And this signals something extremely powerful to the female subconscious. This person has an internal world that exists independently. Independence creates emotional contrast. Contrast creates awareness. And awareness creates attraction. Because attraction intensifies when interaction feels like discovery rather than confirmation. Now consider what happens psychologically when a woman senses she cannot fully predict or shape a man's emotional direction. Her brain shifts from passive reception to active engagement. Instead of simply receiving attention, she begins investing attention. She watches more closely. She notices emotional nuances. She becomes curious about reactions and meanings. And investment changes emotional ownership. People value experiences they participate in creating. When attraction requires emotional participation, attachment deepens naturally. This is why desire often grows stronger when emotional outcomes are not guaranteed. Not because uncertainty feels comfortable, but because it feels alive. Life itself is unpredictable. Growth exists in movement, not repetition. The human nervous system evolved to respond to environments where adaptation mattered. Someone emotionally self-led represents adaptability. He is influenced by connection but not defined by it. And this creates polarity. Polarity does not mean imbalance. It means complementary emotional roles forming naturally. He remains centered. She experiences movement around that center. Not forced, not strategic, simply felt. Now something subtle but profound occurs. A woman begins associating her emotional activation with his presence. She feels more aware, more curious, more emotionally awake. And humans are drawn toward experiences that intensify their sense of being alive. This is the hidden reason desire often follows emotional strength. Not physical strength, not social dominance, but the strength to remain internally stable while emotions evolve. Because stability allows emotional exploration without fear, and exploration creates bonding. Eventually, attraction stops being about control entirely. It becomes about trust. Trust that emotional depth exists. Trust that connection will not collapse under tension. trust that individuality will remain intact inside intimacy. And paradoxically, the less someone tries to control the emotional outcome, the more emotionally influential they become. Because influence comes from presence, not pressure. Desire follows the person who remains whole. And this is the truth rarely spoken openly. Women do not desire what they cannot control because they want distance or confusion. They are drawn toward emotional strength, toward people whose identity does not disappear inside attraction. Real attraction begins when connection feels alive, not secured. When curiosity replaces certainty. When emotional discovery replaces emotional negotiation. Understanding this changes how you see attraction forever. Because attraction is not something you chase. It is something that emerges when presence, independence, and emotional stability exist together. Take a moment now. Let these ideas settle. And if this episode helped you see human psychology more clearly, subscribe to Voxlore Audio and continue exploring the deeper patterns of the mind.